1 times 1 is not equal to 2. Let's start there. In fact, I'm angry at Joe because Joe should have pushed back on that. Joe is in awe.
The calculator says 1 times 1 doesn't equal 1.
Each time you do that, I want to slap you and say, don't do that. And this is one of the failures of Joe's bullshit detector. Then you do this other thing, which is you teach. And your teaching is not good. You tell us stuff that's not true, that we can tell is not true. And then we say, okay, I can throw out the entirety of what he's saying. I mean, 1 times 1 is not equal to 2. Let's start there. In fact, I'm angry at Joe because Joe should have pushed back on that. Joe is in awe.
The calculator says 1 times 1 doesn't equal 1.
There's a lot of wild shit I don't push back on if I'm not sure what that person's saying.
I understand.
That's why. But also because I know that people are going to eventually respond to it.
Right now we've got a crisis where nobody knows what to believe. And unfortunately for you, you were in a bad spot because you wanted to have fun. You had a show and it got really big. Okay?
That's why you're here, Big Daddy.
All right, there's so much going on there. First of all, like I was saying before, Terrence is trying to teach us things that are obviously false because he gets some of the simple fundamentals so wrong. That in turn paints everything else he's saying in the same light. If this guy truly believes that 1 times 1 equals 2, then he's clearly batshit crazy. But the other thing is, and this is truly brilliant, you guys are going to love this. After Eric completely rips apart Terrence's 1 times 1 equals 2 theory and proves how it's completely false, Terrence pivots and starts pushing the narrative that it was just a metaphor and he didn't mean it literally.
When I say 1 times 1 equals 2, that's a metaphor for challenging the status quo. But in me saying 1 times 1 equals 2, like I said, that's a metaphor that there's something very wrong with the math because math should not be done.
There's nothing wrong with the math.
But that's why I keep saying the 1 times 1 is more of a metaphor.
It's not a metaphor to us. It is life and death.
I understand that, but it was really to gain the attention.
They never do it.
To gain the attention.
Listen, you didn't know and now you know.
So he finally openly admitted that he made it up to get everyone's attention. Oh man, that for me was honestly the best part of this episode because that's what everyone's been talking about. Terrence became the 1 times 1 equals 2 guy. He even got the shirt made and everything. Now, after Eric completely shut it down, all of a sudden it became a metaphor. You seriously could not make this shit up.
Terrence, let me ask you a question. Have I been fair to you this time?
You've been amazingly fair. You've given me criticism on things where I've made mistakes. You've told me where
this is
I've
not available
offended
as a
people.
service in academics.
I know.
In academics, basically, it's a closed little world, and if you don't come with protection, we stab you in the eye. I cannot believe how disingenuous this is. He calls you the worst insult in academics, which is there was a study called
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Is both an effect that is studied and the ultimate insult. It's basically your mama.
What can happen is if you're a fan of a subject, let's say, a hobbyist, let's call it, it's possible to know enough about that subject to think you're right, but not enough about that subject to know that you're wrong. And so there's this sort of valley in there, a valley of false confidence. This has been studied by others, and it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. To become an expert means you spend all this time. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't just sit in an armchair and say, I'm now an expert. It requires years and years of study, especially looking through journals where new ideas are published and contested. That's what we have learned is the most effective means of establishing that which is objectively true.